Today, you will hear the testimony of Amir Rashan, a man who lived surrounded by power, fear, and blood. A former Iraqi politician and soldier who signed sentences against Christians without hesitation, until one single night, before a glowing screen, changed everything. While the world slept, Amir clicked on a video by Charlie Kirk, and what he heard there pierced his soul. The words cut through the heart of a hardened man and awakened something he had tried to bury for years. The soldier who once persecuted faith ended up being pursued by the truth, and what began with a simple video became a spiritual war that would put his very life at risk. Get ready. What you are about to hear today is not an ordinary story. It is a confrontation between power and forgiveness, pride and redemption. And to begin, make sure you are already subscribed, leave a like, and write in the comments the city you are watching from, because what is about to happen will move your faith.
My name is Amir Rashan. For many years, the sound of my footsteps echoed through the halls of power like that of an untouchable man. I believed that power was proof that God was on my side. I grew up hearing that leadership was destiny, that authority was sacred, and that anyone who challenged the system was an enemy of truth. I did not see people. I saw threats. I signed decrees with steady hands, without hesitation, believing I was fulfilling my duty. There were days when I woke up before the sun and looked out the window of my office, watching the city awaken in fear. Baghdad looked like a fortress, and I felt like the guardian of its walls. People respected me. Or perhaps they only feared me. At that time, I could not tell the difference. I commanded, and others obeyed. I decided who was guilty, who deserved freedom, and who should disappear. Among those names were Christians, simple men and women who gathered in houses, sang softly, and prayed for a kingdom I despised. I saw that as weakness. These are the fools, I would say. They live on hope while the world belongs to the strong. Today, when I remember those words, I feel a knot in my throat. But back then I believed them with all my being. I thought I was serving God, defending the faith of my ancestors, the honor of my people. Every decision was a battle between the faith I inherited and the faith I did not understand. And without realizing it, I was fighting against the very one I claimed to protect. The days were long, filled with meetings in suffocating rooms surrounded by cigarette smoke. Reports, harsh voices, and promises of loyalty. Generals walked in and out of those rooms with heavy steps, and every word spoken was measured like a sentence. I was young, ambitious, and power made me feel invincible. The orders came from above, and I carried them out, without question, without thought. But there was something I could not ignore. Every time I looked into the eyes of a Christian about to be taken away, I saw something that unsettled me. It was not fear. It was peace. A calm that was impossible to understand in someone who knew what awaited them. It was as if they knew something I did not. That irritated me. I tried to silence that thought, but it returned every time. How can they be so calm? I asked myself. What is it about their God that makes them endure everything? At that time, I hated that kind of doubt. For me, questioning was weakness, and I had been trained never to show weakness. My father used to say, "A man of power does not feel. He commands." And I became exactly that. A man who did not feel. A man who commanded. A man who believed he controlled everything. The truth is that inside, I was a desert. I had fame, money, respect, and the fear of others, not my own. But when the lights went out and silence filled the room, I was alone with a thought that haunted me. What if all this is a lie? What if I am fighting for the wrong cause? Those thoughts were like sand in the gears of my pride. I tried to drive them away with more work, more control, more authority. The harder I became, the greater the emptiness grew. I remember one day when a Christian prisoner, before being taken away, looked at me and said, "One day, you will understand what freedom is." I laughed. Back then, the word freedom meant chaos to me. But that sentence stayed in my mind. I did not know it yet, but that look would be the first sign that God was already watching me closely, waiting for the right moment to confront me. My office was on the top floor of a government building, with wide windows and a view of the Tigris River. From there I could see the city bowing to my voice. It was like being above the world, but the silence of that place suffocated me. I spent hours staring at reports and lists of people I would never meet. They were only numbers, statistics. I did not see faces or families, only orders. And every signature made me colder, more distant, more empty. Sometimes at night I opened the window and heard the distant sound of helicopters flying over Baghdad. The noise of the wind mixed with the echo of sirens reminded me that we lived in constant war, both external and internal. I looked at the reflection of my face in the glass and barely recognized myself, a man who once believed in justice but had forgotten its meaning. My father would have been proud, I once thought. I had achieved what he always wanted. But why then did none of it satisfy me? Why at the height of my career did I feel as if something inside me had died? It was during that time that the government decided to tighten control over the Christians even more. I was appointed to oversee the enforcement of the new measures. It was the dream position for a man like me. Total authority, unquestioned. And yet, the more I signed, the more something inside me broke. The days began to blend together. I saw families being separated, churches being destroyed, and still their songs did not stop. That disturbed me. One of them even sang while being taken away. I never forgot the melody. Soft but firm. It sounded like victory, and it enraged me. How can someone sing in the midst of pain? How can someone forgive the man who destroys their faith? At that time I had no answers, and to hide the questions, I hid behind power. I wore the uniform as armor and the position as a shield. The higher I climbed, the further I moved from what truly mattered, though I still did not know what that was. My name echoed in meetings, headlines, and speeches. People feared me, and I mistook that for respect. I had become a symbol, not of justice, but of blind obedience, and deep down I began to realize that the fear I saw in others was the same fear I carried within myself. I only masked it with orders, with silence, and with authority. Today, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of boots in the corridors. The doors closing, the muffled screams behind thick walls. I thought I was invincible. But time would show me that even the most powerful man in the world is still a prisoner if his heart remains in captivity. I did not know it then, but something was about to break inside me. Everything I believed in, faith, honor, power, would be tested in a way I could never have imagined. At that time, I still thought nothing could shake me. I had learned to harden my heart, to hide any sign of weakness behind the coldness that power demanded. But there are days when destiny seems to conspire against the walls we build within ourselves. Mine began on a gray, heavy morning with the distant sound of rain beating against the government building's windows. I remember it clearly. The smell of bitter coffee, the phone ringing endlessly, the hurried footsteps through the halls, and then the news that cut through the air like a shot. My aide had been killed in an attack. I froze. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. That man was more than an employee. He was my confidant, almost a brother. We had worked side by side for years, planning strategies, signing orders, carrying out missions that few dared to question. He knew my secrets, my fears, and more than that, he knew the system from the inside. And now, he was gone. The first thing I felt was rage. Who would dare attack someone from my circle? But when I entered his office, the silence was almost sacred. The blinds were drawn, the air heavy, and on the desk, between papers and reports, there was something that did not belong there. An old book, bound in brown leather, hidden beneath a pile of documents. A Bible. Instinctively, I looked around as if someone might see me. I touched it hesitantly, like someone handling something dangerous. I opened the book at random, and my eyes landed on a phrase underlined in small, careful handwriting. "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." I stared at those words for a time I cannot measure. They burned in my mind like fire. Free. That word echoed like a challenge. I, the man who controlled lives, the man who could imprison or release with the gesture of a hand, needed freedom. I was the freest man in the country, or so I thought. I closed the Bible quickly, as if that verse could cast a spell on me. But the damage was already done. I left the office with a heavy heart and a strange feeling in my chest, as if something inside me was watching me. That night, for the first time in many years, I could not sleep. The hours dragged on, And when silence filled the room, memories came like shadows. I saw the faces of the people I had condemned. I remembered their calm eyes, those silent prayers that once irritated me so deeply. But now, instead of anger, I felt weight, the weight of every signature, the weight of the orders that came from my pen and destroyed lives. The sound of the rain outside felt like mourning, and I, the man who never cried, found myself choking in the darkness. There was a war inside me. One side screamed for me to stay strong, the other whispered that everything I believed in could be wrong. I tried to push that thought away, but it kept coming back. Insistent, relentless. What if the error was in me? In the following days, I began to act differently without realizing it. I avoided looking soldiers in the eyes, looked away when I saw someone being taken. The words of that verse followed me like an invisible echo. The truth shall set you free. I repeated it silently, trying to understand what it meant. But how can someone so bound by their own convictions admit they need to be set free? I tried to hide the confusion within me, but it grew with each passing day. I began to see how fragile the empire I had built really was. Everything that had seemed solid began to fall apart in silence. Work lost its meaning. Meetings felt empty. Conversations about politics and security strategies sounded like noise. I felt tired, not in my body but in my soul. The man who once gave orders with conviction now hesitated. I no longer knew what was right or wrong. And it was at that point that pride began to crack. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, I sat in front of my computer. The rain pounded hard on the windows and the sound of thunder made the building tremble. I had no desire to work or think. I just wanted to escape from myself. I opened the browser without knowing what to look for. I typed a few random words, nothing meaningful. And then, as if something unseen was guiding me, a video appeared on the screen. The title said something about freedom and faith. I almost ignored it. But the image showed a young American man, dressed in a simple suit, speaking passionately before an audience. His name was Charlie Kirk. I do not know why I clicked. Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe because that word, freedom, still haunted me. The video started. At first it seemed like just another political speech. But there was something different about that man. He spoke of faith with a courage I did not understand. He spoke of Jesus as if he were alive, close, real. And his words carried weight. He was not trying to convince. He was testifying. I remember one phrase in particular. He said, "You can rule a nation, command armies, and influence millions. But without Christ, you remain empty." That phrase pierced my chest like an arrow. It felt as if he were speaking directly to me. I closed my eyes and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Shame. A deep sense that I was naked before something holy. I kept watching. He spoke about forgiveness, about purpose, about a truth that sets the heart free. And the more he spoke, the more my inner world began to collapse. I, who thought I had all the answers, suddenly had none. When the video ended, I remained silent for a long time. The sound of the rain still beat outside, but inside me there was a different kind of silence, heavy, dense, almost spiritual. I felt an inexplicable urge to cry, and for the first time, I did not resist. The tears began to fall. I, Amir Rashan, the man who commanded generals, was there alone with my face wet, realizing that everything I had built was collapsing before a God I had never known. I turned off the computer, but his words kept echoing. Even the most powerful man in the world is empty without Christ. Empty. That was the word. It chased me like a mirror. I had everything: power, influence, respect. And yet, I was broken inside. And it was at that moment, with my heart shattered and my mind in conflict, that I did something I never thought I would do. I spoke to God. It was not a beautiful prayer. I did not use rehearsed words. It was a hoarse, weary whisper. "If you are real, speak to me." The phrase came out trembling, almost like a cry for help. I did not know what to expect, but at that instant, something in the air changed. I felt a presence. I cannot explain it. It was not fear. It was as if someone were there in the room watching me with tenderness. A gentle warmth began to spread through my body, and a strange peace surrounded me. For a moment, everything stopped. The sound of the rain disappeared. Time seemed suspended. It was as if the entire world had gone silent just so I could hear that voice inside me. A soft yet firm voice that said, "I have always been here." I opened my eyes, trembling. There was no one in the room, but I knew something supernatural had happened. I was not insane. I had felt something real, something alive, something that no authority, no wealth, no power could ever give me. That night, lying in the dark, I realized that the true prison was not in the walls I had built around me, but within me. The truth I had tried to silence for so many years had finally found me. I did not yet know where this would lead me. But one thing was certain. The old Amir had begun to die and a new man was trying to be born. I did not know what would come next. I only knew that from that night on, I would never be the same. The next morning, the sound of the alarm clock felt louder than ever. I got up not understanding why I was still alive. The memory of that gentle voice I had heard the night before, "I have always been here," would not leave my mind. I spent some time looking at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked different. They seemed tired. But there was something there. A spark I did not recognize. I went to work as if nothing had happened. The government building with its gray walls and long corridors felt colder than usual. The echo of footsteps filled the air, and for the first time, that place felt oppressive. The same environment where I once felt like a god now made me feel small. As soon as I arrived, one of my superiors called me into an emergency meeting. "There are new orders to sign," he said, handing me a heavy folder. I sat at the table. The words "arrest authorization" were written in large letters at the top of the document. It was another operation against a Christian group. I knew that type of paper well. Hundreds of them had already passed through my hands. But this time, something changed. When I tried to hold the pen, my hand simply froze. It was as if an invisible weight stopped me from writing. I tried to move my fingers, but they did not respond. It was a strange feeling. Not pain, but resistance. It was as if the air around me had grown dense, charged. I could feel every beat of my heart, fast and uneven. The people in the room began to look at me, confused. One of the officers asked if I was all right. I forced a smile, trying to hide the panic. "It's fine," I murmured. But it was not. I tried again. I put all the strength I had into my hand, but the pen slipped from the table and rolled onto the floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the silent room. I felt sweat running down my temples. It was as if God were telling me, "No more." I looked around. The eyes of my colleagues were fixed on me, waiting for an explanation. I simply shook my head, gathered the papers, and said I needed a moment alone. I left the room quickly, my heart pounding. The air in the hallway felt too heavy to breathe. With every step, my mind repeated the same thought. This cannot be happening. I got into the car and began to drive aimlessly. The rain was light, covering the windshield with drops that seemed to move slowly, as if time itself had slowed down. The sound of distant sirens mixed with the noise of tires on wet pavement. I did not know where I was going. I just wanted to escape. From myself, from the orders, from the voices around me. Then, on a curve in the road, the world turned upside down. The car slid. I tried to control the steering wheel, but it was too late. The sound of tires screeching on the asphalt roared like thunder. The car spun, rolled once, twice, 3 times. I felt the impact, the metal twisting, the glass shattering around me. Time stretched. I saw flashes, the cracked dashboard, the blinking light, the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. And then, silence. For a few seconds, I thought I was dead. But suddenly, I heard the sound of the rain again. I touched my face. There was no blood. My hands were intact. The car, completely destroyed, was upside down, but I was alive. I unbuckled the seatbelt and crawled out of the wreckage. The feeling of the cold wind on my face felt like a new breath. The wet ground beneath my hands reminded me that I still existed. The sky, gray and heavy, seemed to be watching me. And in that moment, in the middle of the road, surrounded by debris, I understood. God had given me a second chance. I stayed there for a while, unable to say anything. I just looked at the crushed car, unable to comprehend how I had come out unscathed. No scratches, no cuts, nothing. It made no sense. A driver stopped and shouted something, asking if I was all right. I just nodded. Inside, something was breaking. The proud, rational man, the one who owned everything, finally understood that he controlled nothing. I drove back home with trembling hands. At every stoplight, I looked up at the sky and tried to understand what had happened. Everything inside me screamed that this was no coincidence. It was intervention. It was as if God had used chaos to wake me up. That night, I sat on the floor of my room and cried like a child. It no longer mattered who I was, the position I held, or the respect I commanded. The only thing that mattered was that for some reason I did not deserve, He had spared me. But the mercy of God sometimes comes with a high price. I did not yet know what was coming, but that sudden peace I felt that night would be only the beginning of the most painful battle of my life. The following days were a whirlwind. News of the accident spread. My colleagues wanted to know how I had survived. Some said it was luck, others said it was a miracle. I knew the truth. But something in me began to change, and the system noticed. Meetings started to feel different. The way I spoke, the questions I asked, everything drew attention. One day, one of the generals pulled me aside and asked what was happening to me. "You are not the same anymore, Amir," he said. And he was right. I was not. I could no longer be the same man. What happened next was inevitable. I began to refuse orders. I started to question the operations, the arrests, the way we treated people. In my world, that was political suicide. Not long after, the doors began to close. My colleagues avoided me, and rumors began to spread. They said I had lost my mind, that I had been influenced by Western ideas, until the day came when I did something unthinkable. I publicly declared that I had become a Christian. It was not a planned act. It was an impulse, a need for truth. I could no longer bear the silence, could no longer live divided between two worlds. I spoke at a meeting. I found the truth. And His name is Jesus Christ. The silence that followed was deafening. Eyes turned to me in shock and disdain. Someone dropped a folder on the floor. Another laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when they realized I was serious, the atmosphere changed. In a matter of hours, I had lost everything. I was stripped of my position. My properties were confiscated. My former allies cut off all contact. The phone stopped ringing and the doors closed one by one. My family members distanced themselves, fearing retaliation. My name, which once opened doors, was now a curse. I had to flee, cross borders, hide my face, leave everything behind. I spent nights on dark roads, sleeping in abandoned cars, eating whatever I could find. The man who once controlled the lives of others now fought just to survive. And yet, there was peace. It is strange to say that, but it is true. Even in the midst of fear, even while being hunted and forgotten, there was within me a peace I had never known. I knew I had made the right decision, even if it cost me everything. I began living in hiding in a neighboring country. I found shelter in a small inn, and with the little money I had, I bought a Bible. At night, I read until late. The words seemed to leap from the page and speak to me. Sometimes I cried, sometimes I smiled. It was as if God was speaking to me through every verse. I also began watching Christian videos online, messages, testimonies, sermons. That was how I felt part of something greater, even while alone. That was how my faith grew day after day. But with every new page I read, a weight followed me. The past was still there. I tried to forget, but the memories returned. The faces, the voices, the orders. I saw the scenes in my mind as if they were happening all over again. And the same question always returned. Can God really forgive me for everything I have done? That question consumed me. There were nights when I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I knew I had been given a second chance, but what about the people I had hurt? What about the families I had destroyed? How could I repair what could never be undone? I began to pray more intensely. Lord, if you have truly forgiven me, teach me how to live with what I have done. There was silence, but within that silence something held me up. It was as if God were saying, without words, "I am not finished with you yet." And so, day after day, I began rebuilding what was left of me. Power had been left behind, but purpose, that was still to come. I did not know what God had planned, but something inside me told me that this journey of pain would one day become a testimony. The man who once gave orders was now learning to listen. The one who once inspired fear was now seeking forgiveness. And even though the world had forgotten me, I knew God had not forgotten me. A few years had passed since the day I lost everything. I was no longer the same man. Not inside, not outside. Living in the West, with a new name and a new beginning, I tried to rebuild my life. I worked quietly, attended a small church, and blended in with people who, like me, had left everything behind in search of freedom. I no longer had power. I no longer had status. But for the first time, I had peace. One night, the pastor of the church invited me to a special gathering with Iraqi refugees. He said it would be an opportunity to help those who still carried the scars of war and persecution. I hesitated for a moment. It still hurt to face the past, to hear the sound of my language, to see faces that reminded me of who I once was. But something in my heart pushed me to go. I arrived at the small church at dusk. The soft sound of voices in prayer filled the place. The smell of coffee, the warmth of hands greeting one another. Everything seemed simple, almost familiar. I sat in the back, trying not to be noticed. There were men and women with faces marked by time, entire families who had lost everything, and young people who had been born in the midst of chaos. I watched them and saw in every face a story I knew well, stories I had once helped to create, stories that silently condemned me. Then I saw her. Among dozens of faces, there was one that made time stop. She was a young woman, about 20-something, with a calm and steady gaze. For a moment my heart began to race uncontrollably. I knew her. It was impossible not to recognize that look. It was the same calm gaze that had once unsettled me when I signed the sentence of her father, a Christian pastor whom I had ordered to be imprisoned. My body froze. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Everything around me faded. The voices, the prayers, the murmurs of people. It all turned into a blur. There was only her standing a few feet away, watching me in silence. Our eyes met, and in that instant, all the years of running, guilt, and regret crushed me at once. She took a step forward. I wanted to stand, to say something, but no words came out. My throat went dry. The tears came before the sound. I tried to hide, to lower my head, but it was useless. The weight of that moment was greater than I was. When she came closer, I felt my heart beating so hard it seemed to echo in the silence of the church. I could not look at her without remembering the father I had once condemned, without thinking of how many innocent lives had suffered because of my decisions. I expected rejection, contempt, maybe anger. I would have understood I deserved it. But what happened next was something no words can describe. She stopped in front of me, extended her arms, and embraced me. A firm embrace without hesitation. I froze. For a moment, my body resisted, unable to accept that gesture. And then she whispered, "My father prayed for you every day. He believed that God could still reach you." I could not hold back my tears. It was as if the entire world collapsed, and at the same time everything was rebuilt inside me. Those words broke the last wall still standing in my heart. The wall of pride. The wall of guilt. I cried like I had never cried before. There in the middle of that small church, in the arms of the daughter of the man I had destroyed, I felt something being torn out of me. An old pain, a shadow I had carried for years. And for the first time, I understood what grace truly was. Not grace as a concept, not as doctrine, but as a living experience, as a real touch. I, who had once learned to dominate, was now being overcome by something infinitely more powerful. Forgiveness. I stayed there on my knees while she prayed with me. Her words were gentle, yet carried the weight of 1,000 thunders. She thanked God for my life, thanked Him for my salvation, and asked the Lord to use me to bring that same transformation to others. I could barely breathe through my sobs. It was the love of God manifesting in such a human way that it shattered every logic. After that night, I was never the same. I realized that God had not only forgiven me, He had completely restored me. He had used the very past I most feared to teach me the true meaning of redemption. Today, when I walk through the quiet streets of the city where I live, I still remember the man I once was. And it is impossible not to feel emotional. Sometimes the sound of people speaking in different languages, the soft murmur of laughter, the distant sound of a guitar from the square, all of it reminds me how life can rise again from the ashes. I am married now. My wife is a woman of faith, someone God placed in my path to teach me how to live forgiveness every day. We serve together in a small church. It is not a cathedral, it has no luxury, but it has what matters most: the presence of God and transformed hearts. Today I preach the gospel. I use the internet, the same medium that once led me to Charlie Kirk's video, to reach others who live in the same emptiness I once lived in. When I tell my story, I see in people's eyes the same mixture of astonishment and hope. Many do not believe that someone like me could have been reached by God, and I understand. I also doubted for a long time. Sometimes when I speak in front of the cameras, I think of that moment when my hand froze over a pen, and I understand God was already interrupting me to save me. Now He uses me to interrupt the path of others before they are lost. From persecutor, I became a preacher. From an instrument of fear, a messenger of hope. From a man of power, a servant of purpose. Every word I speak, every testimony I share, is a reminder that the mercy of God has no limits. But do not think it was easy. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. Every day I still wrestle with memories, with the weight of the past. There are nights when I close my eyes and see faces, names, stories. But now, when that happens, I pray for each one of them. I turned guilt into intercession, and the more I pray, the more I understand the purpose of it all. God did not just save me. He called me. And His calling is clear: to use the wounds that once shamed me as bridges to heal others. Today, when I walk through the church and see young people worshiping, hands raised, tears of gratitude on their faces, my heart fills with a joy that words cannot contain. I remember the man I once was: cold, calculating, empty. And I realize the magnitude of the miracle that happened to me. The true miracle was not surviving a destroyed car. The true miracle was God resurrecting a dead heart. I am not worthy. I never will be. But that is exactly what makes grace so powerful. It reaches the unworthy, the imperfect, the broken. It takes the impossible and turns it into a testimony. And if today I have a mission, it is this: to remind the world that no one is beyond the reach of God's love. No past is too dark for the light to break through. No guilt is too heavy for forgiveness to carry. If He reached someone like me, He can reach anyone. That is the message I carry, the flame that will never again go out within me. And as long as I have breath, I will tell this story, not to speak of myself, but to show the power of the one who found me when I had already given up on myself. Because when Jesus speaks, even the proudest man kneels. And that is exactly what happened to me.
And so ends the testimony of Amir Rashan, a man who once knew human power, but only found true strength when he surrendered to the love of God. A story that reminds us that no one is ever too far to be reached by grace, and that even the hardest heart can be transformed when touched by the truth. If this story spoke to you, if at any moment you felt something different, take this moment. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel, leave your like so that this message can reach more people, and write in the comments, "I love Jesus." Because every word is a seed of faith sown into the world. And get ready, because the video now appearing on your screen will touch you even more deeply. In it, you will discover another true story of transformation that will renew your hope and rekindle your faith. Click now, because what God did in Amir's life was only the beginning. There is something waiting for you in the next testimony.